Chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6 is kind of where we left off a little bit last week. I'm excited because y'all know what tonight technically should be? The end of lesson 13 is where we should be. And we are about halfway through, not even halfway through lesson 3. And I love that because it is going a lot better than I had anticipated. And honestly, when we have these kinds of handouts and stuff like that, they're just suggestions. They're a little bit of a guide in our study, but at the same time, they're not a set structure. I would much rather us not follow an outline and learn more than to follow an outline and miss out on opportunities for growth. So let's pick up a little bit here in Genesis chapter 6. We'll notice that we talked a little bit about the severity of sin this last time. And one of the things that we made mention of is how quickly the world went from a place that was sinless, or the world went from a place, oh there it is, a place that had no sin to a place that was covered with sin, and the thoughts of man were continually evil. The thoughts of those who were created by God had become continually evil. I'm actually going to go back a little bit. Yeah, to right here. The thoughts of man were only evil continually. And we see this a little bit in verse 1. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took them as their wives, and they chose any that they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, where the sons of God came into the daughters of man. They bore children to them. These were the mighty men of who were the old men, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention and the thoughts of the heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord God said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals, creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have even made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Okay, so what we talked about last week was pretty much one thing, and that was the sons of men, this idea of the Nephilim that was mentioned. There's only one point that I'm going to bring up. I did a little bit more diving. Hopefully, I asked some more people what they thought. And the conclusion that I have come to is that I still have no idea. But here is a suggestion that I would recommend. Notice when these Nephilim are mentioned. Okay, they're mentioned just before the flood. And remember, you have mention of these descendants that are mentioned, the descendants of Seth and the descendants of Cain. And then you see that man's thoughts and intentions were only evil continually. You will also see after this instance of the flood, after the world has been destroyed, after God had only saved 8 people on the ark, you'll see these mentioned again in 2 other places, one time in Ezekiel and one time in, I believe it was Numbers, if I can remember correctly. I'd encourage you to go read all 3 of those, because it's the only 3 places that you'll see that word, and then get a better understanding based on reading those 3. But we're going to do that on our own time, because it's something that we could probably circle around the drain for hours and hours and hours and still end up about right back where we started, if not further back from where we started. So I encourage you to read those 3 instances, and a quick search on your computer will be able to bring that up, just looking at the word Nephilim. Let's jump into verse 9, though. Actually, let's kind of set a little bit of context here. We made mention of verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, that every intention and the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And notice in verse 6, the Lord regretted that he had made man on earth. Can you turn me down just slightly? I'm looking down too much, I guess. The Lord regretted that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Something that was pointed out to me as I was looking a little bit deeper into this week is notice who is paying for the sins of man in this instance. You'll see that in verse 5 it says that the wickedness of man was only evil continually, or the thoughts of man were only evil continually. But notice who is paying the price in verse 7. The Lord said, I will blot out man, of whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heaven, for I am sorry that I have made them. Okay, who is paying the price for the sins of man? It's not just man. Notice who else is mentioned. The animals. All of creation is paying the price for man falling into temptation and for man's heart becoming only evil continually. What does that tell us about our actions within themselves? It means that the consequences for our actions don't always end with just us. Sometimes the decisions that we make and the things that we do affect others. And when we think about with the idea of the animals, they're innocent. Okay, they don't have souls. They cannot sin. So the sin of man is now being placed not just on man, but is now coming to the destruction of the animals as well. No, they do not.
Animals, it tells us what the purpose of them, or what the purpose of everything that God created was for man. So it's not. Let's be careful when we say those are being. But I understand what.
Yeah.
Everything pays a consequence. But there's no need for it if there's no man. They were here for man. God.
Correct.
God set it up that way.
What else pays consequences for our sins besides just animals? Notice here what he says. Created man in the face of the land, man, animals, creeping things, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. What had God destroyed in the process of destroying man and the animals? What else did he destroy? The world. Everything. Okay? And his joy for having made them. And at the same time, are there still some of these consequences for our sin being shown on these animals and the creation of God today from our own actions? Okay, you know what destroys a lot of our world today? Greed. What do? We want more, so we destroy more. And then we build bigger things for ourselves. Why? Because we want more. Greed. Now, there's still a whole lot of planet still left out there. And I'm not saying that, we should all be tree huggers. But I would say this, that we need to always remember that God gave us this creation as a gift. And just like if you give anybody a gift, you expect them to treat it with respect. Yes, sir.
They kept things cool all year long, 72 degree weather. That was gone. So after the flood, man didn't live that long. Oldest 120. They didn't have 110 something like that. They lived, 900 years through. But after the flood, the county was gone. The heat made life short. That also was great God.
The entirety of God's creation suffered because of the sins of man. And I believe still suffers today because of the sins of man. Now, I like what Mr. Dell said here. It's something that I want us to make sure that we touch on. Notice what is said here. For I am sorry that I have made them. I'm sorry that I have made them. Being creation within itself. Not just man, but creation within itself. You think about doing something and you don't, anticipate what's going to happen next. That's not the case with God. God created this world knowing what would happen. So why does it say that he regrets or that he is sorry that he made them? He knew what was coming. So how is it that God can regret something or be sorrowful for creating something if he knew it was going to happen.
It doesn't make him happy for us to be disobedient and so wicked.
Exactly. It still, even though he knows it, it still doesn't make it easier on him. You think he had the expectation for us to do better?
He made everything good.
He made everything good.
When the blood came all before the blood, man became wicked, he got grieved God. Don't talk about that son about don't be no spirit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sin to God. And you don't tell them what was going on before. I don't want to get mad.
There are a few times in Scripture when we see God's regret for stuff like this. And it's not just in the flood either. Anybody else remember where else it's found? Maybe not in the creation itself, but made God to regret something. Yes. We'll start here. He'd just rather start from scratch. In fact, he warned the Israelites through many prophets, it would be easy for me to wipe you from the face of the earth and then go and pick somebody else to be my people.
I think one of the hardest things God had to do is watch his own son die.
Yeah.
Sing loud. That had to be good. Jesus had to come and say, thank God he did. That tells us how serious sin really is. The weightless death is what. Sin is
See?
separation from God. That when this sad day comes, it'll be 10 weeks when we'll be with God. We'll be lost. Separated from God. That's serious.
You know, what I see here is people with, what I see as being the underlying problem here, especially from verse 5, is that these people had a seared conscience. It's not that they were just doing things that were evil. They had no regard for good. It no longer affected them. People do evil things all the time, but consciences keep us in check from time to time. Oh, that was wrong with me. I shouldn't do that. I should be better. I need to apologize for that. What we see here in verses 5 and following is that the world had gotten to a point where people were doing wrong and it didn't even bother them. It didn't faze them. Therefore, that's why you get this only evil continually. It wasn't just you had an evil thought and you corrected it. It was that every thought and intention was evil. Except for good old Noah.
That lets you know that God was not even in their thought process at all.
Because he is good. And at the same time, that would also show God's patience. He waited until there was one man. Notice what it says here in verse 8. Okay? But Noah found favor, grace, in the eyes of the Lord. Okay? If I'm not mistaken, do you see anywhere in here where he mentions the faithfulness of his children? If I'm not mistaken, I don't ever see it. Notice there's one person pointed out as being found faithful or found in favor of God, and that's Noah. Of 8 people saved on the ark, 1 was mentioned. What does that tell us about God's patience and long-suffering? He waited until there was 1 person left that still believed in him and still had faith in him before the end of the world, before the destruction.
That was still in the patriarchal age where your
Father. Yep.
and people still respected their parents at that day and time. I think that would have a lot to do with it because those children didn't build the ark. They were non-believers. They would not have kept him. They would have complained like,
Yeah.
like so many of us love to do. Why are we doing this?
Yeah. 100 years, Dad.
100 years to build this thing.
Yeah.
We would have given up way before then.
Yeah.
At the very least, they were under subjection.
Yeah, at least. Whether or not they were faithful in God's eyes, they were in subjection to their Father's command and His will.
After the flood was over, they weren't really good.
No. No, they were not. You know, that has always baffled me. And I'm tempted not even to touch it tonight because I know we're going to get to it. But that has always baffled me. But somebody helped me to see it. And one thing that they mentioned to me that really kind of helped to open my eyes was we separate ourselves from them so much that we don't remember that they face the same kind of mentalities that we face today. When you think Noah had just seen the entirety of the world destroyed. Everyone he knew besides his closest relatives killed. That's probably not an easy sight to see for Noah. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to that in text. But so we see the thoughts of man have become only evil continually, and there's one man that is mentioned in specific as being faithful or found in favor of God's sight, and that's this Noah. Let's look at him for just a second. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation, and Noah walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark is 300 cubits, its breadth is 50 cubits, and its height is 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark in its side. Make it with the lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which it is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die. Okay, I want to pause here for a split second, because I know that if I don't pause here, I'm going to forget what I was going to say about verse 17. Notice what he says, for behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the what? Breath of life. Okay, remember something. How was Adam created? Formed from the dirt, and God breathed into him. Okay? Notice what is mentioned here in verse 17. I will destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Okay? That to me points out the singularity of God's love right here. You recognize the fact that each person was created not just in the image of God, but by God, molded by God, and he breathed into it the breath of life. If that weren't the case, he wouldn't be saying this right here. Because if it was the case that it was only Adam and Eve, then he would say, I'll destroy Adam and Eve, and all the other people too. What we see here is this individualistic mindset of his love, this individualistic show of his love. All right, let's keep going to verse 18. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds according to their own kinds, of the animals according to their own kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come into it, and to keep them alive. And you shall keep them alive. Also, take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that the Lord God had commanded. Notice verse 22. Noah did this. He did, notice here, all that the Lord God had commanded. That's a very, very important part. That word all there is a very, very important part. Meaning that Noah followed his directions to a T. What we see here in this study of this ship of salvation here, and this long-sufferingness of God, what we see here is Noah was picked because of his specialized look to the words of God. He found favor in the sight of God, and notice what is mentioned of him in verse, Verse 9, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Noah knew what it meant to be a follower of God. He did the acts that were meet for one who follows after God. So when we think about, why did God choose Noah? Well, one, he said that he found favor in his eyes. For what purpose? He walked with God and he did what God said to a T. Meaning that if there was going to be anybody who could build an ark that would take 100 years and be massive and be able to fit 2 of every kind of animal, it would be 300 cubits by 50 cubits by 30 cubits. He knew that it was going to take a lot in order to get this done. So he had somebody who was faithful. Yes, sir. No, he didn't. He didn't have no DeWalt's to help him out with it. No. Yeah. But he did have good old Shem, Ham, and Japheth. You ever think there was some strife amongst that? Man, you think 100 years of doing a project together? About 15 minutes of working on something with my dad, we get frustrated with each other. Were you going to say something?
Since we're in the speculating mood, verse 13, verse 11.
Okay.
Also kind of explains or has been, there's a hint of evidence
Yeah.
there for, the dinosaurs in particular. We've talked about it time and again. We know they were here. There's evidence of them here. But we also see the evidence of most of them being killed in a flood. Even here in the United States where they find them, they're finding them in places where they were killed with the flood. Verse 11 is part of that reset. We talk about God's done with the epochs. When we study history that way and the resets. We talk about the flood was a huge reset that God did. The earth was corrupt. It wasn't just man. The
Earth
all
itself.
in it. God was tired of the violence.
Yes, sir.
And that's been implied in also of the animals. And a lot more violent than
The animals that destroy and kill each other.
This speculated that this could also have meant that God didn't like none of the way that the earth had gone, and he did just a complete reset, we studied and science proves some of this out, but it wasn't explaining when and how in the Bible exactly. We get hints of it with stuff like this, of possibilities of it. We know that it happened. Our science, our history, the things that we can dig up tells us these things. So there's got to be but it was not that big a deal to God. He didn't
Yeah.
explain all these little things.
Yeah.
But he tells us quite simply,
Everything was violent.
Everything was violent, and he was going to change that to a new world order. The continents probably separated.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't need to know all those things, but we see evidence of history, evidence of science that this did happen. It doesn't matter in the big scheme of things,
Yeah.
but it did happen. And this verse is one of the hints of that.
I would also maybe add to that. What do you think that leads God to view not just us as a creation today, but us as even maybe specifically a nation today? One of my favorite go-to, I don't want to say classic or old songs because it probably came out when some of y'all were my age. So one of the great good songs from the past, I guess you could say, was I believe by a man named Johnny Cash. Anybody remember the song "Don't Take Your Guns to Town"? Remember? Oh, it's a good one, man. You like that song? Yeah, I like that song. Okay, you know what it's about? Violence. It's this thought process that's within your mind. If you have access to the thing that allows for you to put forth violence, then what are you going to do? Well, like we found out by the end of the song, get in a fight, pull a gun on somebody, and lose your life. Okay? Not to say that that's the case for everybody or for everything, but what has our world gotten to? We've gotten to this point where violence has become such an answer to things. And violence has become such a usual response to things. And you'll notice very quickly that violence causes very immediate division. It causes problems amongst people. Okay, God's message on this earth was, when He came to this earth in the form of Jesus, was constantly that of peace and unity, not of violence and division. When we look at our mindsets toward violence, it shouldn't be something that we strive for. Oh, I'm ready to take up arms and go to war. Why do you have that mentality? That's not the way we should treat it. Okay, we're to want peace. Okay, that's what we are to strive for. This is what Jesus taught. That's what He showed. That's what God showed throughout His creation. And when we get to 6 chapters into the Bible, we see very quickly that God wiped the planet completely clean with the exception of 8 people and 2 of every kind of the animals because of this very thing that people live by today and strive by. That scares me a little bit. It scares me to think that people are so prone or excited for moments of war or of division. Because gives me a little indication of the direction in which our world is headed. Maybe that of the descendants of Cain. No, he won't. It'd be much worse. Be much worse.
And violence doesn't just happen all at once. People sit and dwell on probably the less God that they have inside them. They sit and dwell on evil, mean things, and then it becomes their speech. And then they start taking action. So I guess you can correlate this back to the less God saw of himself in the world, then he knew he had to destroy it because it was taking all the meaning out, all the joy. I relate it to those of us that have children, or we all are somebody's child. We know we disappointed our parents before. And then to see the disappointment on their face, and this is what mankind did to God, is we disappointed him, we still disappoint him. And we make him sad.
And yet he still loves us. And he still doesn't send a flood every day. Or strike us. yeah. Or hit us with a lightning bolt. Let's open to Matthew chapter 5 really quick. I say really quick. It's probably not going to be really quick. We're probably going to spend a lot of time here. I'm sorry. Let's look at verse 21. Jesus begins his teaching with the Beatitudes on the Sermon on the Mount. He mentions the blessed are thee, such and such as, and then he makes mention of the salt and the light, and then he makes mention of that Christ came to fulfill this law, and then he gets into this new type of teaching where he begins to compare the old law with the new law, bringing in this new law. And this new law is ushered in through Jesus' teaching on the Sermon on the Mount, because he is God in the flesh. We may mention that. Jesus was the Word. The Word is Jesus. And so when we see the Word, we see Jesus. When we see Jesus, we see the Word. So as he lives out these actions, as he speaks these things, he's bringing into existence this new law. And we see here in verse 21 a little bit of the idea that Mr. Randy was touching on here. You have heard that it was said unto you, to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable of judgment. But I say unto you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says you fool will be liable to hellfire. So if you are offering a gift at the altar and you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge to the guard, and you to be put into prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. What does Jesus say about this idea of coming to terms with your anger, or coming to terms with your disputes? He says a couple things. One, you ought not to do it. And two, if you have a dispute, what are you to do? Drop what you're doing, even if that's worshiping God, and go handle that dispute. Why? Because he understands that the end result of this anger, if it seeps for too long, can lead to something as horrible and terrible as murder. After the sin of Adam and Eve, after the sin of Cain offering the wrong sacrifice to God, we see this jealousy that is planted within him in that moment. And that jealousy results in him killing his brother in a field, and then trying to hide it from God. That's one of those things. That's one of those like father, like son moments. Cain sitting there, God comes to him, where's your father? Am I my brother's keeper? You look back to his dad, a chapter before that. What was he saying? Well, it's your fault. Responsibility is not on me. It's on you. It's on somebody else. It's not my fault. Cain is saying, me? It's not my fault. Am I my brother's keeper? God understands that if we allow for anger to seep and to sulk, that its end result can end in the loss of life. And so Jesus institutes in his teachings, don't just not kill somebody. Don't even go down the path which leads to somebody being killed. Don't allow for anger to seep. Allow for it to happen, or don't allow for it to happen. But if it does happen, don't allow for it to continue. Take care of it quickly. I had the opportunity yesterday of sitting down, and I don't even know how it happened, honestly, but I sat at a table filled with cops. And we just got to talking about the city a little bit and talking about some of the stuff that was going on. And one of the things that we were talking about was violent crimes. And the leading statistic for violent crimes are people who know each other. And the reason is because those things build up over time and they spill over in passion. The wrong kind of passion, the passion that is angrily taken out on somebody else. The crimes of passion. Do you know who I hate to get into statistics like this, but do you guys know who the leading killer of individuals is? You know, it's the first to turn to? Husbands and wives, the spouses. Why? Because people let it sulk and then they commit murder over something that could have been as simple as somebody speaking a wrong way to them. I know, right? The person that you love the most, that you devoted yourself to the most. You take their life over something that is undisputed. Yes, sir.
So it's not so much the event, but your reaction to it.
Correct.
And the impact it has on you moving forward.
Well, and I would say not just that, but I'd also say the mindset of never going down that path again. It's not just the idea of what started you on that path. Okay, you can make a mistake, you do something wrong, but you fix it so that you don't end at the end result. But at the same time, you always remember, I don't take that way home. I don't go that way anymore. That's the mindset.
But both parties have to be willing, speaking from great experience.
Yeah.
You cannot approach people that are not willing to be approached. And even if you're willing, you can't solve all the problems.
No.
You know what?
There has to be two.
You know what Paul said about that? As able as you can be, be peaceful with all men. As good as you can be, then do what you can. As it is up to you, or as it depends on you, be peaceful with all men. What does that mean? Do your part. It's up to them whether they respond to their part. Do your part. Remember, we don't say the term kill them with kindness, because killing them with kindness is still killing them. But show them kindness. Show them love.
But it still hurts you.
It still hurts.
Souls are at stake.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a hurt.
Yeah.
You know,
I think JW said last week, or it might have been Mr. Daniel. I don't know. I can't remember. I'll remember it eventually. God said to do it. He didn't say it was going to be easy. Yes, sir.
you know, not only did Adam blame Eve, who else was like,
The devil. Wait, yeah, God, yeah. How often do we do that too? Yeah.
well, praise God, complain, God didn't do it. He says it's every good and perfect gift. You blame somebody, blame the devil.
I still think Adam had the choice either to eat it or not.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, Eve did as well, even with the temptation present. The same way that every temptation that you face, you have every right to not fall down that path.
Probably he waited, and when Eve did not fall dead immediately, I think he took his life.
Yeah. Well, you think that pride entered into his mind immediately too. Well, Satan's right, or the serpent is right. You shall not surely die. You think he stepped back a little bit when he took the apple? I don't know.
Well, definitely separation,
Yeah.
and separate from who?
God.
That's when you take.
Still the difference is Adam and Eve were ashamed and hid themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Cain showed no
No remorse.
and by just excuses, but by the time of the flood, it was able continually, and it never would have crossed their mind to have remorse. So
That's the line.
digression.
Yeah. That's the point in which God says no more. Was somebody saying something? I'm sorry.
That's the devil.
That's the devil.
That's the devil.
Yes, ma'am. We had an instructor that said, he would always say, the devil made me do it is the biggest cop-out that we've ever made in our lives. We talk about it as, somebody saying, well, the devil made me do it. Well, kind of, you could make that argument, I guess, but you still did it. You still did it. And even within that statement, the devil made me do it. Meaning what? I still did it. I still did it.
He sets up a situation that he should.
Yeah. Yep.
But also you get some parenting
Yeah.
advice throughout. God's not going to stand there and slap us on the wrist, slap us on the wrist.
Yeah.
He gives us
The opportunity.
what we should do, and lets us make those decisions. He gives us that free will. It goes back to that's how much He loves us. He wants us to willingly come to Him. He could make us at any time. That's not what He wants. That's not
Yeah. The third time or the fifth time, yeah.
Because, you know, if it had been correcting on down the line, but that's not what God wants. That's not what God expects of us. But as parents, we got to do things a little different until they get to an age to make their own decisions.
One of the scariest phrases I still remember my mom saying is, do what you think's right. Or go ahead. You know, what does that really mean? Don't you dare. But what does the teenage boy think it is when he's 16? Mom said, yeah. It sounds like a great idea to me. I'm free. I can do what I want. You know, you almost picture being in the naivety of that, you know, of just thinking, awesome, you know. But at the same time, we put ourselves in those same situations as Christians. You know, how many times does God say, it's your choice? You do what you want. It's your decision. You have every free will and you have every control over your actions. Go ahead. And yet, what do? We sit there and we look at him and we go, that's God's way of saying yes. He didn't say not do it. So that means I don't have, you know. No.
One of the best things Mother ever told us when we leave the house is, I trust you.
Please don't say that to me, Mama. I trust you. Probably shouldn't. Probably should. So it's her fault at that point, really. It's her. No, yeah. Well, that was something that my parents instilled in me from a very early age, is you earn the respect that we give you. You know, when we give you respect, it's because you earned it. If you don't get respect from us, that tells you about the way you've been acting, kind of thing.
Sometimes if your children ask you something, once they get older.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will tell mom sometimes, if you're having to ask me that.
You probably know the answer. Yeah.
You know what's right and what's wrong. You're just wanting me to make that decision for you, but you've got to make that own decision for yourself.
I can't tell you, man, the times I still ask my dad stuff. What do you think about this? He'll be like, ultimately, it's your decision, son. I'm like, no, that's not why I called you. I wanted you to tell me yes or no, kind of thing. We'll pick up with the idea. We're actually going to look at a little bit of the long suffering, not too long, next week. But we're going to look at the singleness of the ship a little bit. And we're going to talk about the importance of the crossing, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, the importance of paying close attention to the commandments that God gave Noah, as well as to the commandments that he